Welcome everybody to the last seminar of the 2020 academic session. Today we have a wonderful panel of 4 folks, and they're going to tell you about things that happen in K-12. And now I'm going to steal part of Dan Massey's thunder by saying, why should you, as folks in technology, cybersecurity, and policy, worry about K-12 education? And the answer is because you're going to become leaders in various organizations. Some of the people who you work with are going to have kiddos in K-12 education. And what you are doing is you're laying a foundation for that future. And then the question becomes, what are some important issues that you may confront, not tomorrow, as just simply engineers, but as leaders in engineering, etc. And so our colleagues, Dan Massey, Bobby, and Jen, and of course Al, they're going to tell us parts of the story of technology, cybersecurity, and policy that is actually focused in and around K-12 education. So first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for a wonderful semester. And now I'm handing things off to Professor Dan Massey, the Director of Technology, Cybersecurity, and
Policy.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I think I'm actually going to just initially pass it over to Al to get us started, to Professor Alpasano.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome, everyone. We have Axel also mentioned there as a participant. So what we'd like to do to start, I'm Al Pisano. A lot of you know me in the program already. See a few of my students in here. I'm working with TCP, happily working with TCP officially now. I'm here with a few folks that I really just want to quickly let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into K-12 and cybersecurity. We have a few questions for the panel throughout, but feel free to use that chat area to ask questions, and we'll either answer them during or just after we're done with the roundtable piece. It's very much an organic conversation around K through 12, and we're lucky enough to have experts in the field, including our director, Dr. Dan Massey. Without further ado, Dan, you want to kick off the introductions? I think everybody knows who you are, but then we'll go on to the rest of the group.
Sure, I'll go real quick, right? So as you know, everybody knows, I'm here at CU working on helping to direct the TCP program. Teaching cybersecurity. I've been working cybersecurity for a few decades on both the industry side, education side, and government side. Well, one thing I think a lot of folks may not know is that we've been working actively with the area's K-12 school districts and working with some national groups on K-12 cybersecurity curriculum. We'll talk about that a little bit more throughout the presentation, but I won't waste any more time on my intro. Instead, let me hand it over to let's go to Axel. So Axel, you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, nice to meet everyone. Axel Reitzig, I'm the coordinator of innovation at the St. Vrain Valley School District's Innovation Center. St. Vrain Valley schools are centered on Longmont. They cover Lyons, Meade, Frederick, Erie, Niwot. So we kind of cover a big geographic area. Just real quickly, I focus on robotics and computer science, and I help develop programming at the Innovation Center, including classes and after-school opportunities. Work throughout the district with teachers to develop curriculum and professional development, and then also work on partnership development for the district. So working with our industry and higher ed partners, folks like Dr. Massey and Al, to kind of learn from them, and then also find opportunities for collaboration.
Great, thank you, Axel. Jen, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jennifer Payro. I am also a TCP master's student and in the seminar class. I've never done a panel in my own class. It's kind of fun. I am an instructional cybersecurity and technology manager currently at the Innovation Center, which is what you see here, and that's also where Axel works. And I've had the opportunity to work with Bobby and Dan quite a bit, so really happy to be here to share some experiences.
Excellent, thanks. And Bobby?
Hi, I'm Bobby Bastian. I teach at Bowman Technical Education Center in Adams 12. It's the Career and Tech Ed Center for our district. And I teach computer science and cybersecurity. Along with teaching computer science and cybersecurity, I am also the high school computer science coordinator for the district. And I do a lot of instructing of teachers, helping them to develop both curriculum and helping them to learn how to teach different courses.
Excellent. So if just take notice of the range of experience we have here. We're lucky to have everybody here as a group, and collectively their knowledge is going to make it for a really great discussion. Dan, you want to start off with our first question, which is really about why cybersecurity matters. And please, panel, you can chime in on this and any other questions as we move forward. But then, why does cybersecurity matter in general and in K-12?
Sure. So I'm going to give kind of the elevator pitch, which hopefully everybody in the program knows, but there's some other folks, who are new attending for this seminar for the first time. All right. So a range of statistics nationwide. One of the more conservative, meaning lower estimates, is we've got a 1.8 million workforce shortage projected by 2022, which is only 2 years away. Here in the state of Colorado, we rank 50th in the nation, right? That's not so good because there's, that doesn't put us ahead of a lot of other states. So 50th in the nation in terms of the cybersecurity supply demand curve, meaning there's a huge demand for cybersecurity jobs in this area and a relatively small supply, right? So we've got a huge nationwide gap. Colorado is among one of the worst states in terms for employers. One of the best states for for you as you guys graduate. And what we really need to fill that is we need a diverse workforce, right? We need folks who come with a variety of skill sets. We need a variety of experiences to really address this. And so we've got our I could go on for this for another 20 minutes, but I'm going to stop there, just saying, like, we have a real shortage of cybersecurity people, and Colorado in particular has a shortage.
Yeah, and Dan, we can't really expect to fill that shortage or that gap starting in either early college or even graduate programs. So what I would really like to talk about with the group for the next couple of minutes, and I'll go to each one of you, is why we need to start this in K-12. But if you think about cybersecurity as a topic, cybersecurity affects us all. It's going to affect even those that don't go into the cybersecurity field. I mean, you could look at the news and look at all of what's unfortunately happened with COVID-19 and all the cyber attacks that have come with that. Affecting regular folks in their jobs and their daily lives. So it's something that everybody needs to be aware of. It's a field that everybody needs to be aware of. But in K-12, it's actually a really wonderful discipline and area to learn about because it's interdisciplinary and it's similar to things like digital literacy and STEAM and even robotics, which Axel will speak to later. It crosses all disciplines, which is very much like the real world as far as the workforce goes. In education, we're taught singular subjects, but the reality is the kids are best taught when it crosses all grade levels and disciplines, and it's experiential learning, which cybersecurity encapsulates really well. So I'd love to ask each one of you, you are all in the field, you're in the trenches in K-12, in a very different world in K-12 now too. But what do you, I'd love to hear from you to focus the next few minutes on what's being done in K-12 now. What are you guys doing? What are you guys seeing? And maybe we'll start off with Bobby and we'll go down to each one of you to hear your thoughts on what's being done in K-12 now to kind of give people the landscape of what's going on now. And you guys are pioneers in this space, but if you could just say a little bit about what's being done. Bobby?
Well, in Adams 12, there's a lot being done. At the middle school level, our 8th grade computer science course actually has a cybersecurity unit integrated into it. At the high school level, we have a cybersecurity class. Our district has been working on expanding the Cyber Patriot program. We've also had multiple schools within the district participate in Girls Go Cyber Start this year. One of the really cool things is we've been working in our district with our IT department to provide opportunities for our students. So like my cybersecurity students this year got to go on a field trip to actually visit the data center and meet with the cybersecurity team at the district. Today, my students actually got to join a WebEx meeting with 2 people from Cisco, and they learned about doing a risk assessment. Earlier this year, my students got to visit Johns Manville, and their cybersecurity team actually spoke to the students about what it's like working there and the different types of jobs that they do within cybersecurity. And so there's a lot of different things going on when we look at experiences that students have, along with different competitions that are out there that they get to experience, like Pico CTF, Girls Go Cyber Start, and then SANS Cyber Aces.
Yeah, and you'll start to see as we talk to the panelists how many different levels they're involved with and how many different aspects of cyber that they're involved with. And it goes across community, it goes across K-12 into committees and all that fun stuff. So you hear a lot of what they're doing and how it really spreads and ranges throughout. Jen, we want to comment a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually want to go back to the why start in K-12. Yes, we cannot wait for college, especially because some students could go into cybersecurity and not, sort of more directly into a technical job without ever going to college. We want to capture those kids' imaginations, before they're leaving, because they may never even get that experience in college. So I would argue big time for that. I've also seen from my experience teaching and bringing in speakers, I've seen how students love hearing the journeys of these different cybersecurity people. Like they have such, so many of them have such weird, sort of life experiences. And I've heard a lot from speakers that hire people that they want people with different backgrounds. So it encourages people to go out and take on these different jobs, but always keep cybersecurity in the back of their mind as something that they might, focus on one day or do one day. So I really think those are reasons to start in K-12. So some of the things that I've been involved with, actually with Dan, we did cybersecurity teacher education camp for teachers. That's where Bobby got involved, and then she was a part of leading a camp a second year for teachers. We've been doing work with teachers in our district, anywhere from rolling out some units to rolling out full courses. We have, Bobby touched on competitions. We're Cyber Patriot has been spreading throughout our district. That's also something Dan brought into our district. So, and I can't tell you the stats. He could probably tell you the stats better, but we've been doing competitions with Cyber Patriot and also camps for students as well in the summer.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for adding to Why Start. It is K-12 is the lifeline for a lot of these industry jobs, and what educators do at that level is paramount, and leaders in education do at that level is paramount. Axel?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what other people have said here. So I had to move locations. My internet connection wasn't so good. All right, there I go. Look mysterious. We really
the light shining on you, Axel.
There you go. Whoa. We do really strongly believe that whatever we do begins at the earliest grades. So we are, with our computer science initiative, for example, we have been working already with preschool students to develop some of those skills and experiences. We also approach things systemically. So anything we feel that is worth doing should be available to any student throughout the district. So the philosophy is a student's zip code should not matter for the opportunities that are available to them. So those are some of the guiding principles that lead us. In terms of like how we develop programming, or we're striving to develop programming around cybersecurity, I think there's 4 frameworks or ways we're doing that. So one is curricular, what's happening in the classroom. And again, that's K-12. So what does that look like at the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level? And then there's what we can look at the extracurricular opportunities. So what's happening in those after school spaces or the informal learning spaces. So that ranges from after school clubs, weekend hackathons, camps, and then, but also what's happening in places like maker spaces or libraries, or even the corner of a classroom. A third category is what's happening, what are we doing with our higher education? So how are we aligning with community colleges and universities to make sure whatever work we're doing is creating pathways for our students to have success at those levels and opportunities at those levels. And then finally, we have to look beyond the walls of education and realize that there's a world beyond that that we're preparing our students for. So that's really strongly related to partnership development, working with industry, learning from industry, and cooperating with them to develop opportunities for our students. And that can range anywhere from doing camps or events to finding internship or apprenticeship or work-based learning opportunities that we can provide our students. So anything we can do to allow our students to see how what they're doing connects with the world beyond K-12, I think is a big part of our ambitions.
Yeah, and it's a really wonderful point too. The interconnectedness of all of this is really key here. And for all the students here to be able to, there are so many opportunities to help out K-12 with those students interested in this space, but also the fruits of the rewards of that is that we learn too when we work with K-12 students as well, and opportunities arise from that. So really, really well said there too by everyone. So Dan, you want to add anything before we move on to that next question?
Yeah, sure. So so I see we've got a couple questions in the chat. So let me. One of them is a great transition, and one of them I think is definitely worth an answer on sort of the opinion. So one question is, so okay, I mentioned how Colorado is 50th in the nation in terms of supply demand ratio for cybersecurity. So why is that, right? And here's my opinion on why that is, right? On the demand side, Colorado is a national leader in some of the areas that really most desperately need cybersecurity. Right? So we are actually a huge government employer, right? We've got both on the military side and on the civilian side. Colorado is one of the top places in the country for government employment. We've got massive national labs like NCAR, NTIA, NREL. We've got Fort Carson, we've got Peterson, we've got Buckley, we've got a ton of military resources. So there's a huge government demand for both full-time government employees, active duty military, and contractors. So there's a big demand for cybersecurity folks from the government side. Another thing we have is, and I hope you guys know this, Terry Fees from the Vice Chancellor of the university will really make this point, is Colorado is one of the most vibrant startup scenes in the country, right? You think like, okay, yeah, Silicon Valley, of course, Silicon Valley has got a ton of great stuff. Boston, areas of Texas and so forth, but we are right in that group. And we are one of the most exciting startup places as ranked by both venture capital funding folks and new starts being led. A lot of those startups either relate to cybersecurity or desperately need cybersecurity to make their startup go. So on the demand side, huge government, huge startup, and we have a huge set of industry that relies heavily on cybersecurity. Huge aerospace, the Northrops, the Lockheeds, the Balls, who are all right here between where we are in Boulder and Colorado Springs. A ton of those folks. Not to mention anybody who's, well, you're not walking around Boulder now because of the stay-at-home orders, but when you walked around Boulder before, and when you walk around that again, you can see the new buildings coming up from Google, VMware, Carbon Black, all this. So the demand is here, and so that's great, right? And so lots of opportunities. The last part on that, and then I won't spend too much time on. I've already spent too much time on this. On the supply side, we as the university are frankly failing the state. right? We do not have enough people in the cybersecurity programs right now. We are not robust enough at delivering great students. I'd love to tell you that we've got that 1.8 million workforce shortage solved by we've got an incoming class of TCP students of 1.8 million, but I'll tell you it's a little less, right? And and so I think the universities still need to catch up. So right now, the state has been relying too much on importing folks from out of state. Well, we've got a ton of great talent, a lot of people who are here on the seminar right now who are here and can fill those jobs. So, all right, but that's a tangent.
And Dan, you want to take that next section, lead that next section?
Yeah, absolutely. So, another question that's in there is like, okay, so, where does this fit in the curriculum, right? Is this, can we put this into math and English and foreign language, or are these electives? And I think that actually comes to a question where the whole panel, but I'll go to Alan first in particular, has some expertise. Is so, are we talking about fluency in cybersecurity, or are we talking about cybersecurity workforce training? Because it'd be great to have in my English class a little bit of cybersecurity. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to go off and work for Northrop Grumman as their cybersecurity expert. Alan,
yeah, and I think Axel started to articulate this as well. If you could relate it to interdisciplinary topics like we were talking about before, STEAM, robotics, and digital literacy. So the fluency piece is I think, important for all subject areas, all grade levels. Axel mentioned even as early as elementary school to start integrating some of these ideas, some of these principles. Even if it's just this experiential learning, problem-based, project-based learning, design thinking, those are all building blocks, not just for cybersecurity, but for a lot of different fields within this area. But the fluency piece is really important. But then as students get older, they're going to gravitate towards, if they're interested in this, some of the skills necessary to get into this space by honing some of those things that the fluency piece allowed for, that they started early on and got into their later career. It allows them to easily transition into a field like cybersecurity because that fluency is already there. I'd love to, and then I'll leave it to you, Dan, to kind of see what everybody else thinks of that as well.
Excellent. Yeah, so I think that is one of our biggest challenges for both you, everyone on the phone who's going to be future leaders in this area, and the folks who are in there currently, is, what's that right balance between, giving some fluency, everybody needs to have a little bit of fluency in cybersecurity nowadays, or you simply can't do your job, even if your job is, answering phones for a company, right? And some of you have seen me play videos of the DEF CON, the woman hacking into the phone, right? That those frontline customer service people need to know how to deal with cybersecurity, as does the CISO at Carbon Black. And I think there's some similarities to I'm going to draw some similarities to what's happened in sort of the robotics space, which also needs to draw from a pretty broad base and broad background. And Axel, I mean, how do we get cybersecurity in, and how do we reach this diverse set?
Yeah, I think the earlier we start, the more exposure we can get for we have students more aware of what cybersecurity or computer science is about, and that they can start identifying themselves with those fields and those opportunities. So that's why for us it's really important to start doing that already in early elementary, that they have this awareness. One question that came up in the chat was, is computer science still an elective class, or cybersecurity, or is that happening? Is that being kind of integrated into core curriculum? Currently, it's still pretty much in our district as an elective offering, but particularly at elementary and middle school level, we are doing a lot of integration. And so what our teachers are doing is looking at their existing standards areas, so let's say math or science, and then finding natural connections with cybersecurity.
and then using those opportunities to do some lessons or activities. So kids are hearing about cybersecurity, they're learning some of the vocabulary and getting some of the concepts down. And that's where I think some of those extracurricular opportunities then come in. With robotics, our after school clubs have been a real driver to introduce students to engineering, to STEM, to programming. And by doing that at the elementary level, we now have a wave of students moving up through middle school into high school who have really wide variety of or awareness of what these opportunities are, and they start thinking in themselves as future cybersecurity experts. And then in high school, that's where we can start creating these more defined pathways. So I think all that kind of covers, Dan, what you're talking about, and Al, of that broader literacy or fluency. You know, everyone just has this general awareness of like, this is an important topic, this is what it's about. But then in high school, because we've already captured their attention early on, you know, they can start thinking about these as possible career pathways. And then we develop courses, find concurrent enrollment opportunities, internships, those kinds of things to encourage those students who really have a passion for that area. And I know Jen and Bobby have done a lot kind of in that area. So I wonder if they might speak to how they're kind of capitalizing on work that's done at the earlier levels.
Yeah, so you know, one of the things that gets asked is, you know, do your students need to come in with a technical background? And because it's still, you know, we're still, at least I'm still recruiting students for the class, I say no, you know, you don't need any technical background. And because there are, you know, fewer advanced opportunities during the school day, I have students that, you know, have done, they can write a whole resume of things they've done in cybersecurity and probably get hired right out of high school, to the student that doesn't know anything except, you know, sort of equates it to digital literacy. So differentiation is a big key right now, but it also allows for, you know, looking ahead to the future, like, okay, well, what is it that, you know, really interests you about this? What do you know, how would you want to advance? And being able to work with students from that perspective and giving opportunities for, okay, so you already know, you know, how to do this. What, you know, what does it look like for you to take that to the next level? Or how can you create something for students to help students work through that? So that's something that we're having to be sort of creative about. And I think it's interesting because then you're getting to teach with your students, which I really enjoy. But I do look forward to when we can start to really advance for our cybersecurity, you know, our more advanced cybersecurity students, which is why we're, you know, sort of sharing this with you and saying, like, we do, I mean, being able to partner with industry people or higher education people really brings in a robustness we couldn't do on our own.
Within Adams 12, we currently, the way our program is set up, our students either need to take AP Computer Science Principles or AP CSA, so they have some programming background, or if they start off in Intro to Computer Science and have done Cyber Patriot, then they can also take Cybersecurity. One of the interesting things is because I'm career and tech education, I have to have an advisory committee that has students, industry, and post-secondary on it. And one of the things that one of my students brought up is, well, what if instead we had students coming in from AP Psychology as a prereq for the course instead of a CS background, because then those kids who are interested in the social engineering piece, that would be something, because my kids really love the unit that we do around social engineering, that would be a really good way to get more students and more females involved within the class. One of the other things that we found is, and this will be the second year that I'll have had a student who will actually be interning for the NSA. Students, if they get to my class their junior year, at the beginning of their junior year, they can actually apply for the NSA internship, and their senior year, they go to school half a day and they work for the NSA half a day. So there are some really cool internship opportunities out there for students that are in high school.
And Bobby, I think it's particularly interesting that the suggestion that psychology is a key aspect coming in came from came from your students at an advisory board meeting, right? This was not, and
Yeah.
there was strong agreement from the industry folks who were in there, but it was interesting to see that you'd already made that transition with the students to convince them that, yeah, there's a lot of important technical things here, but there's a lot of important social engineering as well, right? And just understanding that. So I got to admit, I was a little surprised about that, and that was not where I initially would have thought the prereq for for high school cybersecurity was. But I was interested to see that come out. And were you expecting that, or what happened? What happened?
I was not expecting that, and actually, it actually evolved out of a conversation of how do we get more females involved in both computer science and cybersecurity. And so students stopped and thought about what kind of classes are females interested in, because I had 3 seniors that actually sat in on my advisory committee. I have a set of twins, and it actually came from one of my twins who recommended it, because he said he felt bad that his sister was one of just a few girls that were in my classes, because my ratio is about 1 to 20 when you look at females to males within both computer science and cybersecurity.
Yeah, we're going to move on to the next section, but Axel, I know I've had conversations offline with you about this as well. Attracting, as far as the demographic, females we've seen just sort of tail off, especially in middle school and any of these fields, right? We've had these conversations. So is there something you or others do to sort of attract certain demographics or students overall into this space to sort of help eliminate or alleviate that threshold from getting into the space, or the fear of getting into the space? Is there anything you guys do in that regard, as far as women or other underserved groups in this space?
When I talk about the class, we have people coming, bringing the students throughout the, oh shoot, oh yeah, sorry, okay, bringing out the students across the district. So what I do is I will go out there and talk about these different aspects, different jobs that can be done in cybersecurity, different things that they will be learning about, and that they don't have to have any technical background. And I think the fact that I'm a woman kind of helps. And I've actually seen that with my techniques. That's not cybersecurity. It's an Apple certified technician class. And I've seen a lot more, a greater increase in girls signing up for that class.
Great, thanks, Jen. Axel, you going to say?
Yeah, I think it's just a multi-pronged approach that you have to take. So starting earlier, I think, really helps in my experience, and from just reading and talking with teachers at that level. Girls particularly are at the upper elementary level are really starting to develop identity. So if we can have them have meaningful experiences with a field like cybersecurity at that age, then when they go to secondary level, they're more receptive to seeing themselves taking those opportunities. So when they hear about a cybersecurity elective class or a camp or an apprenticeship, then they can see that being something which relates to them. So that's a big part of what we're doing. I think also prerequisites, we talk a lot about that. I think our tendency or our philosophy is to de-emphasize prerequisites as much as possible, so that we can pull in a larger group of students and then really support them wherever they're at and meet them wherever they're at. And that helps to kind of broaden the range of students available. I think also intentional outreach. So when we have opportunities or classes, making sure we're going to those communities, to those populations that we really want to target and pull in, and really personalizing that too. So having not just a one and done, but repeatedly going back, finding the people who are the best advocates in those communities, building relationships with them, and selling them on why this is an important opportunity for the folks that they represent and they work with. So I think it's just a range of different tools that we have at our disposal. And I think it's just a matter of being intentional and thoughtful and kind of systemic with implementing those.
Great, thanks. And Dan, I know you have two girls in this space. If you want to speak to it as well, please go ahead.
Absolutely. So I've got two maybe challenges to put out to the group here, right? So I'll note that we have amazing leaders. This is a field that belongs to everybody, right? Here on the call we've got Jen and Bobby who are doing amazing leadership in cybersecurity education. At the state of Colorado, our Chief Information Security Officer, Deb Bly, right, is the woman where I was at DHS, right? So the good news is at the higher level, right, some of the leaders are, we have a little bit more diversity at there, but nowhere we need to be. I see my daughter is doing homeschool, a few rooms over. I know if one of them was here, what they would be saying at this point is a little bit sarcastically, what we probably need is more older males talking about why don't we have more women in cybersecurity, and so not that any of us on here or I wouldn't put us any in the older group, right? But I do think that there's so the two messages I can give you from this is that this is a field that really needs diversity, not because that's what it takes to actually make things secure is a bunch of different perspectives. And that not to put additional pressure on the folks who are already making the field a little more diverse, but we would love to support you any way we can to help get that out there. But I think there is a bit of a there is a toward my daughter's point, which she makes to me a lot actually, is that I think some of these we're very much open to initiatives that come from folks in the trenches to say, like, what does attract you into the field, what and what are negatives, and the better we can understand that, the better we all can do. So I wish I had better answers there, but I think we're making some progress, but not nearly enough.
Hey, Dan, can I add to that?
Sure.
In my experience too, having a variety of experiences for students to engage with the topic or the content in is important. Not just emphasizing the technical side of things, but finding opportunities for again a diverse group of students to find meaningful engagement with cybersecurity. So that takes a little bit more work on our part as instructors to kind of understand, like our client, basically the students are our clients. How do we develop experiences for them that really motivate them and keep them wanting to continue forward? And I think that having that diversity of experience can help build up that diversity of workforce.
Yeah, well said, Axel. And I know, Dan, you do a lot of things and speak to a lot of times how cybersecurity is more than the programming and the analyzing what's on the computer. You do wonderful activities which you've shared with very physical things like a briefcase and people trying to break down what's going on and how they infiltrated things from the physical setting as well. So it's more than just that piece, that the technical piece. And Axel, like you mentioned, it's really important to have students understand that there are multiple entry points into this space. In regard to curriculum, I want to move on to the curriculum piece itself and speak to the group about some of the things that we're offering in these courses. Is there guidance out there? And I would even add, how might some of these folks in the program in higher education get involved with the shaping of that or contributing to that as well? I'll just go through each of you to sort of talk about it. And you've mentioned some of this before, so if you want to just elaborate a little bit more or restate what was said earlier in this regard. Bobby, you want to just go over kind of a high level or maybe more detailed level what's going on at Adams 12?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the course has evolved over the last couple of years. When we first started the course, a lot of the curriculum in it was based off of different resources that were out there, like the NYSERC curriculum, taking a look at things that were on Clark Center, information and activities that I had gotten from participating in things like the Gen Cyber Camp and different workshops on cybersecurity through like the CSTA National Conference. And then last year, the cybersecurity framework came out, and Jen's going to talk some more about that. But the course has evolved to start meeting some of the standards that are within that. The other thing that's really driven the way that my course has been set up is my advisory committee. Having the post-secondary educators that sit on my advisory committee actually give input and feedback as to what key things are that should be within the course has really helped. Having opportunities for students to get hands-on experience. Part of the stuff that my kids get to do is all of my kids who are in my cyber class participate in Cyber Patriot. And so they actually learn how to take and harden systems. They use Packet Tracer. We actually have where my kids start by learning how to build a cable. And then once they've built a cable, we actually have some servers and machines that we build an air gap network within my classroom. I have students that actually intern for our IT department. And one of the really cool things is in my last call with Cisco, we're actually working on an internship program to be set up for my kids for the upcoming year so that they get some more hands-on experience in the field. So hopefully that answers your question.
Definitely does. Axel, could you maybe do, and Jen, you're talking in the chat as well, so chime in some ethics policy questions in there too. Axel, can you just sort of give a brief overview of the course at St. Vrain, and Jen, feel free to jump in there as well.
Well, actually, I think Axel is going to talk more about the development, and then I could talk more about the course specifically.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Sounds
You want
great.
to tackle the
Sounds
course, Jen?
Yeah, sure. So when I came on when I started teaching the Intro to Cybersecurity course, we had mostly finalized the CCF, the Cybersecurity Curriculum Framework. That was something that I worked on with Dan and a team to draft out a framework from which teachers can draw their ideas and questions and learning objectives to be able to build out a course or build out a unit. So instead of starting from scratch or just grabbing, random lessons from out there on the internet, they could actually do something that was cohesive. And so, and as a teacher, I was trained to do backwards design. So you start with the end in mind, and the framework provides these learning objectives, enduring understandings, essential questions, and knowledge statements that are all framed under these big ideas. And ethics is actually the first big idea, not that there's an order, but people wanted to see that at the top as partly to distinguish it from computer science. But ethics is the idea is these big ideas you'll see throughout a course. And so we want ethics. There was a question in the chat about that. We want ethics to be a part of every unit and, throughout the course. So I hope that sort of, I use those to create these units that are more engaging, like citizen security. So students are getting that opportunity to look at their own, cybersecurity, be able to protect themselves, protect their families, be able to talk to other people about it. Then data security, or keeping secrets is what I call it. How do we keep secrets in the digital world? So designing it more for something that students would become engaged in, instead of saying data security, keeping secrets, but then, building out what those learning objectives look like. So they, I know whether they're hitting these targets or not. So I hope that gives a good enough background into it.
No, that's great, Jen. Thank you.
And thank you, Dan. Dan did put a link to that framework in the chat. Thank you for that, Dan.
And Dan, I know you were involved in it as well, so we'll hear from Axel, but please chime in too with this as well, Dan.
Sure. Axel, why don't you?
Yeah, I think, when we look at curriculum development, curriculum is a pathway that leads to destination. And when we look at cybersecurity, in the discussions we've had in our district, and Dan and Jennifer, can talk to this as well. But when are we having students kind of work towards maybe a pathway that would connect with what happens at a community college? Maybe more in the network kind of field, or would it be a pathway that leads towards a higher education destination? So that's kind of one consideration I think that we've looked at. Um, at one of our high schools, it'd be 2021, I think, Dan, right, where the PTech will start. That would be a very defined pathway, a career readiness pathway that students who would participate in that PTech, they would start in ninth grade, be together as a cohort for 4 to 6 years. And then at the end of those 4 to 6 years, they would have a high school diploma as well as an AAS degree in cybersecurity. And that would enable them either to enter the workforce right off the bat out of high school, or they can continue on to college. So we also have that model that we're looking at. I think the challenge of curriculum is to know which pathway we want that curriculum to connect with. And then, what are the learning objectives that it's aligned with? So I think the work that Dan and Jen and Bobby have done on that curriculum framework is really, really important for our teachers, because that helps define the learning objectives that they have for the students. I think also going back to that theme of, is it a broader literacy that we're trying to develop, just general awareness, or are we trying to develop deeper learning opportunities for students? That's really important too. And I think those deeper learning opportunities are where we need engagement from people like in this class, or people from industry, because most of our teachers don't have expertise, obviously, in this field. So having that expertise shared with us and our students is really impactful.
And so along those lines, I think one thing that may be of interest to the whole group here is, and we put this in the chat, is so at the K through 12 level, we've got a national, a nationally developed cybersecurity curriculum framework centered around 8 big ideas. And unfortunately, you have for free, you have to register to get access to the framework right now. Apologies for that, but it is worth taking a look. And I think the folks who are in the current TCP program hopefully are going to recognize a lot of those big ideas, right? So we've got data security, we've got system security, as has been talked about in the chat a lot here. Big idea number 1 is ethics, right? And there's a reason that that's one of the big ideas, and there's also a reason why we made it big idea number 1, right? Although the ideas were not meant to be ordered, but if anybody was going to be one, it should be ethics. The other thing that's kind of fun maybe to look at later, if this kind of thing interests you, is the CCF team was able to get some of the experts from around the country in cybersecurity to record short videos describing what each of the 8 big ideas are. Jen is doing one of them for an overview, so you can see a great video by Jen. Other folks you may recognize, Professor Nolan Scaife, who's here in our as part of our program, and some of you may have had a course from Nolan, is another one of those. Other folks are national experts. So worth looking at. Right now where we're at is the framework itself. The big ideas are hopefully relatively stable. The challenge now is to integrate that into actual curriculum. The framework is a framework, not a specific curriculum. Jen and Bobby are 2 people in particular who are then turning that into specific units and also giving some evaluation feedback on what the framework does. So there's a lot of activity here, and I think it's informative for us at the higher education level as well, because a lot of the ideas translate across. I think it's informative, especially for everybody here on the seminar, as you go out and you become leaders in your industry. We'd love to kind of have you keep in mind that, hey, how did you get to where where you're going to be. I suspect many of the people, well, I'm just going to say all the people on the seminar here are someday going to be high power leaders in the cybersecurity space. What can you do to help build that path backwards to get other people here? And so we'd love to kind of get that in. And maybe this is maybe a good way to kind of throw over to, I'll just pick on, say, Jennifer. So Jennifer, how much does that interaction with industry matter at the K-12 level?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, and Axel can speak to it probably better than me because he's worked at the Innovation Center where we do that. But I mean, it's phenomenal. Even for the online learning, we've had to switch to online learning because of the pandemic. And I was able to interview one of the, a gal that worked at IBM, and she was a supervisor for the pen testing team for IBM. She's now in a new position, but we did an interview, and the students' reflections on that was phenomenal. I mean, it was just, and that's just recently. So, I mean, of course, working with Dan, that's just been tremendous. I've seen Dan work with so many teachers and building out things, and being able to bring in people to work through problems. It's invaluable. I mean, there's no way the course would be as robust, or our programming would be as robust if we didn't get people from industry.
Yeah, I want to echo what Jennifer said about Dan. I think Dan's been, that leadership has been really instrumental for what's happened in our district and in Colorado. So I know he's worked with a wide range of educators. And I think the analogy, the question was, what's the value of having industry or higher ed partners? It's the idea of building a bridge to nowhere. That if we didn't have that guidance and that input as educators, that's what we probably would be doing to some extent, is developing a program that maybe didn't really lead somewhere, right? I could imagine a student starting in 9th grade and going through high school, doing curriculum, and hey, this is great. And then they graduate, they go to college, and they find out that everything they were learning in high school really has no relevancy to the real world. So that's having the input and the guidance and support from people who know what is happening in that field. We couldn't do what we're doing without that.
And Bobby, you have a pretty amazing advisory board. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, and to add to all of that, I guess one of the things that I want to point out is when you look at becoming an expert in a field in anything, you need about 10,000 hours of work in that field. Well, if you're trying to do all of that when you get to college, you're not going to graduate with that full amount of experience. And so if you start, the younger you start, the easier it is going to be to get to that 10,000 hours to actually master that field. Because I know one of the questions that I was asked was, why, if students are getting this experience in high school, do they still need to go to college? And when you look at depth versus breadth of learning, you want them to be able to go deeper into the field to actually be more successful. Sorry.
Yeah, and Bobby, to add to that, I think if we're only doing sort of this myopic knowledge and study in higher education and graduate programs, and you're not sort of intertwining, to Jim's point and to Jen's point about being leaders in this field, if you're not intertwining and intermixing with some of the stuff that's being done in K through 12, you could really add to the depth of knowledge by working with other groups, whether it's a committee you're on, whether it's K-12 you're involved with, the leadership that, this group that we're in this TCP seminar, I have a lot of them in the leadership class, and they are, you guys are sort of the pioneers in this space. It's a new space, and inevitably you will be the leaders in this space. And understanding the value of connecting to K-12, in my mind, is really important for all of you to consider, because it does expand your knowledge and experience in a way that you cannot get And we try in TCP to expand and connect the industry and do all those wonderful things. But this is a big part of it. And part of our vision is to have you guys experience things at every level and learn from K-12 students, from industry, from any and all of the above. Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with, with everything about the importance of that engagement. And so there's, for the students, on the phone here, especially. So I want to make sure we hit a few key points, right? So first, I totally agree with Bobby, but you really do need a master's in TCP, right? So, don't, and, no, but the other thing is, I think what we're really looking for, what we're really encouraging on your guys' hand is, so when I was in graduate school, we had the Distinguished Seminar series, which we always called we internally, the grad students, we called it the Make Us Feel Bad seminar series, where they would do the brief bio of the person who's like, when I was 5, IBM gave me a fellowship, and I built my first mainframe computer that's now being used by 7 Fortune 500 companies. And we're like, yeah, I wasn't quite there when I was 5, right? So for a lot of folks here, I think what we want to do is we want to encourage that group that's coming behind us, right? To then hopefully get them started in K through 12. And if anybody here started in cybersecurity, at the high school level or earlier, awesome. Congratulations. You were smarter than me, and I think smarter than a lot of the had more foresight than a lot of the folks here on the phone. But what we can do now is we can do some really amazing outreach, both to expand our knowledge of cybersecurity, and as we move out into that workforce to build that up. There's advisory boards, there's competitions, and don't feel like you have to be the CEO of the company to be on the advisory board. For both the Innovation Center, for St. Vrain and Adams 12, I would say that some of your advisors are those C-level executives, right? But some of them are also sort of a really good, ambitious tech person. And you don't need to say like, this is something I'll do when I become, CEO of Apple or whatever it is. This is something that you can do now. And so I'd encourage you to do this. And I think that you'll also find that you learn an amazing amount by working with the students. One last dumb story, and then I'll pass it back to Al, which is, so we used to set up, before CCDC was fully formed, we used to set up our own competitions, and we would map out all the ways that the competition would progress. We'd say like, okay, I bet what's going to happen is the students are going to first find this vulnerability, and that'll allow them to pivot over to here, and that'll allow some escalation over to this. Not once did we ever get the anticipated attack path to match the real attack path. You gain a huge amount by somebody saying, my favorite one was we had one where we thought the main thing at the end is there was a vulnerability that we thought at the end somebody might be able to go in and completely take down the firewall. And if you got that was going to be sort of the pinnacle of the competition. Turns out in the first 20 minutes, every team had taken down the firewall, and our whole plan of like, this is how it will lead you to different clues was completely out the door. And some of the things we thought were obvious were never caught. So I really encourage that outreach. And Bobby, Jen, Axel, I mean, how do people engage with you guys for outreach?
Hey, Dan, I'm getting noticed we're close to over time. So I don't know if you wanted any thoughts on that one quick question, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you, everyone. Thoughts on Dan's last question there? Anyone?
Job shadows for kids, being able to not go to tech companies per se, but like John's Mansfield, they build things. And so getting to speak with their IT and their cybersecurity departments.
Great. Any other thoughts before we close out?
being a mentor is huge. So the impact of mentors at the Innovation Center is invaluable.
Great, and I think maybe if we could, Dan, maybe we'll put something together if people want to get in touch and want to be involved. If any of the panel has information that they'd like to share with us, we could put it out to the participants so that we take action on some of this wonderful things that we talked about and allow the students to have the opportunity to get involved. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Dan. Jim, I'll leave it to you. Any closing remarks or thoughts?
So again, let's say thank you to all of our speakers, our panelists today. Technology, cybersecurity, and policy. You've just had a forward look at what will happen. Lots of opportunities, lots of transformation, K-12 to higher ed, interdisciplinary teams, all of those things are going to be part of your future as you sit in the technology, cybersecurity, and policy seminar. So everybody say technology, cybersecurity, and policy. And thank you all for an enjoyable semester. And oh, by the way, get as many of your written reports in as possible. You're all making good progress toward the degree. Thank you very much, and goodbye.